Hello to everyone in the internet. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching Culture Shock, the only show on the internet that knows how to separate an issue of culture from an issue of politics. It is currently Saturday, December 1st, and today's episode is... it's heavy. This is gonna hurt, folks. SaveJames.com. I will make this brief. A woman, Miss Georgeless, I don't know her first name, Georgeless, has divorced her husband and got all child custody rights. But this woman is clearly deranged, taking her kids away from husband Jeffrey Younger, and forcing. There's two twin boys, and one of them she's forcing to dress as a girl and live as a girl, named Luna. When he's with his dad, he's all boy. He's been misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria, which I think doesn't exist anyway. She's clearly suffering from what they call gender disappointment, where a woman wants that particular gender of child but doesn't get the one she wanted. This is a real thing that's been studied by psychologists. It's depicted in media like anime and movies. It's depicted in... It's sickening. Women are not as mentally stable as men, it would seem. Mind you, adults can do to themselves whatever the fuck they want. But not to kids, not even their own kids. Okay? Child transgenderism is completely insane. Because not only is she making him dress and act like a girl and register to school as a girl named Luna, but pretty soon she's planning on putting him on hormone blockers at 8 and getting in surgery to turn him into a girl. These boys probably know for a fact that James is not a girl. They know. These kids must feel really strange that their mom is making them do this. James Dutt probably is horribly confused, doesn't know what's going on, and is simply obeying his mother because young kids that young tend to do what their mothers tell them to. For the most part. Once they're past the terrible twos, and they get into be like ages 5 or 6, they pretty much do whatever they're told for the most part. That is, if they've been properly disciplined. So he's basically just obeying his mother. Now here's what they say the criteria for gender dysphoria in children amounts to. Number 1, a strong desire to be of the other gender or an insistence that one is the other gender. This is rare and almost never happens, with 1 or 2 exceptions. And even then, I think it's because the child is confused and has yet to properly grasp the concept of biological sex yet. A strong preference for wearing clothes typical of the opposite gender. So, girls wear pants. Sometimes boys wear skirts. A 12-year-old boy in England went to school wearing a skirt. Mostly to make a point about them not letting boys wear shorts, but still. You know, sometimes kids like to wear the clothes of the opposite sex. It's play for them. They're exploring, you know? A strong preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy play. So, adult men wear women's clothing in cabaret shows. Does that mean they want to be women? Well, in some cases, probably, but these are children. Again, it's they're probably just exploring the concept of biological sex and gender. They're just exploring. That's what little kids do. They explore, they discover, they learn. That doesn't mean they actually want to be the other gender, that just means that they're exploring it. A strong preference for the toys, games, or activities stereotypically used or engaged in by the other gender. So, sometimes boys play with dolls. And sometimes, yes, even very small children can be perverted, and sometimes they play with dolls so they can look up the doll's skirt. That's a thing. When I was a kid in kindergarten, I remember there was this one boy in class that used to do that. He got a lot of detentions, but it happens. A preference for the playmates of the other gender. I played with a lot of girls in school. I'm a guy. A strong reflection of toys, games, and activities typical of one's assigned gender. That's because that's stereotypes. Stereotypes are not always true. That's what makes them a stereotype. A strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. I've never seen anything like that happen, and I imagine it probably doesn't actually happen. A strong desire for the physical sex characteristics that match one's experienced gender. That is probably fictional and made up. Those last two, I guarantee, were made up. I've never heard any child ever express any such idea. Not once in my life. In fact, I think gender doesn't exist. I think that the only thing that really exists is biological sex, and then personality types that are formed and defined by our own subjective experience. And therefore our personality is impacted by every little thing that makes our subjective experience what it is. Bottom line is, there are no transgender children. It's their parents, and sometimes the courts, sometimes doctors, quacks, convincing them that there's something wrong with their kid. It's a panic, like the satanic sex abuses, where people honestly believe their kids are being abused by Satanists. It's the same thing. They believe it because it's a mass panic. Everyone thinks it's real because they've been convinced by the zeitgeist. Most of these can easily be explained away by, your girl's a tomboy. She acts a little boyish. Or, your boy acts a little feminine. Right? There's plenty of very feminine acting men who are absolutely straight. That just happen to be a little more feminine. Because gender doesn't exist. It's just their personality. That's just how they are. God, this is all just so completely nuts and messed up. What should really happen to this woman, Miss Georgilis, is that her license to practice pediatrics, yes, she's a pediatrician doing this, her license should be immediately removed from her. Her license should be taken away and she should be imprisoned for child endangerment. Anyway, moving on before I hurl. And a fake study proves the gender wage gap. This information comes directly from the Daily Wire, which they had the study on their website, and I read through it. And of course, the stats are buffed by counting things that shouldn't count. It's been double counted. It's been messed with. Typical tactics of a leftist study. Bottom line is, feminism on the far, far left, there's nothing honest about it. The SJWs are masterful liars. They're really good at telling people what they want to hear. In fact, we need to get the more sane center-left feminists going up against the SJW feminists. We need them to put an end to this constant reign of absolute bullshittery. Let's see these far-left feminists and SJWs prove that patriarchy exists. Where's the evidence? Otherwise, it's just a conspiracy theory. You might as well prove the Illuminati while you're at it. Hell, they probably think the patriarchy is the Illuminati. They probably conflate the two together in a giant jumbled up mess. Truth is, nowadays women hate men, but men have never hated women. Right? That's what do you think chivalry was all about? That wasn't hatred. Women and children first off the Titanic? Men have always loved women. For one reason or another. But only women have ever hated men. It's only ever been one way. The truth is, what gap exists is tiny, and it is caused by life choices. Wanting to leave the workplace to go take care of your child and be with your family. Because that is a drive in women that is informed by their biological anatomy. Okay? It's part of their biological function as being female. Females are the social glue that keeps the group together. It happens in other species, it happens in our species too. That does not prove gender, that just proves that, their anatomy is, their brain, their anatomy is compelling them to act a particular way. Their body is telling them, go be with your family, go take care of your kids. And the women are just listening to that drive, that instinctive impulse. Which they should. Human instinct will rarely steer you wrong. It does sometimes, but not always. Moving on. "125 girls and women have been raped and beaten in the South Sudanese civil war. And the fact that sexual violence is increasing even during peace times. Sudanese, aka Muslims/Arabs. And you know what their culture is like. I'm not really fond. I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm a little bit racist because I do not like Arabs. Their culture is gross. Some guy grabs some random kid, boy or girl, drags him into an alley and rapes the crap out of him, and no one bats an eyelash. In the Middle East, that kind of shit's normal. For them, it's completely normal. Happens every day. The feminists want to talk about a rape culture. There's your rape culture. It's in the Middle East, not here. Mind you, college campus rapes, the statistics show that they are genuine. Don't get into the far right's narrative either. Don't go to the far right, don't go to the far left. A lot of them are genuine. And some of them are men. But truth is, a lot of them also got unreported. And we don't know the statistics on that. 2 to 10% unreported, and we don't know whether they're real or fake. Sometimes you just don't know. But that's only on the college campuses. Out in the greater society, it's a lot smaller. Trump has been teased by the Russians for missing G20 and blaming U.S. politics. Look, he probably canceled G20 because he felt he couldn't make it. Okay? He probably canceled because he didn't have time. And in our modern day society, sometimes we just don't have time. Sometimes we gotta trim the fat just so we can make it to the end of the day. You know? So I think the Russians making fun of them or acting like children. Anyway, Pope Francis is complaining about gay priests, but that's not really the problem. Let me tell you what causes pedo priests. The vow of celibacy. Take a liquid, pour that liquid into a container, put that container under pressure in a pressurized environment, and then break that container open. What happens? The liquid comes spilling out because it's been pressurized. Like soda in a can when you smash it on a rock. Similarly, human beings have an instinct. We have a sex drive. And choosing to ignore that and bottling it up, eventually our pressurized container breaks. And it just all comes pouring out all at once. Suddenly they're saddled with this overwhelming urge to go out and do it. And hey, there's an innocent, helpless little kid who's not going to be able to fight back. Easy game. They just want the satisfaction because they've been bottling up the whole time. Celibacy is not healthy, for the most part. Maybe after a certain age, like after like 50 or so, then you might be able to get away with it. When the urge to do it has lessened over time. But while you're still young, that's what makes rapists. Is they're having a hard time containing this wellspring of desire. It's perfectly normal, healthy, and human. And that's what causes it. Is bottling it up. It's not because they're gay. The conflation of homosexuality with pedophilia is nonsense. They're mutually exclusive, and people need to stop tying them together. They have no relationship whatsoever. A Kenyan charity holds a pageant for albino Africans to restore and maintain their dignity. This might be the most uplifting story because in Africa, in places like Tanzania, sometimes you see white albino Africans chased down in the street. You know, they cut their throat and then they extract their internal organs because some of them still believe that the organs of a albino African hold magical properties. You know, it's like fucking voodoo and shit. Sometimes they're beaten, killed, strangled just because they're different. So a cosmetic company is prettying them up, beautifying them, and putting them out there. As to what an albino African looks like, just picture a white person with African features instead of European features. And that's pretty much what you're getting. An albino African would look very normal in a place like Europe, aside from their bone and facials. Their facial structure would be different, but otherwise they'd fit right in. Bottom line is, Africa is not a civilized continent. It's full of all kinds of deranged, primitive, violent, and perverse behavior. But this beauty pageant is going to help restore and maintain their dignity. And it's going to make them stand up and say, "Leave us alone." So, good job, Kenya. Good job. We love you now. Before we end this episode, I want to ask you one last time. Please visit SaveJames.com and get him away from his crazy-ass mother trying to turn him into a girl. Just because she wanted a daughter and got a son instead. Anyway, folks. Yeah, and using her position as a pediatrician to get her credibility so she can go through with it. And inspired by the transgender craze. Anyway, please visit that website. Tschüss.